Welcome to class. Um, we just start right away. Today we shall be looking at regulatory requirements and building code. Regulatory requirements and the presentation outline will just we'll look at introduction to regulatory requirement and building code, the administration of it, requirement and enforcement, technical details, building material standards. So a building maintenance standard, those are the headings that we're going to look at today. By way of introduction, what is a building? What is a building code? There are a set of rules that specify the minimum standard for constructed objects, such as building or non-building structures, usually applied to the engineers and architects designing the building. Serves as guide for safety inspectors. Building codes have been used by government units for centuries to ensure that buildings remain safe and sanitary. Now, generally, building codes are for to equate the standards of building, and generally, building codes are written in such a manner that the minimum acceptable standard, international standard, is adhered to around the world. That's the reason why building codes were involved, and it's a legal document to ensure that where people live, where they work, and where they play, they could live, work, and play in a safe environment without being exposed to excess hazard. That's briefly just the reason why building codes were invited. And it's such that there are a set of rules that must be adhered to. That's why once the inspectors come in, they normally will certify if a building is safe. The safe factor that the inspectors certify or give is based on the code that has been adopted in that particular region or country. Now, the inspectors normally will not take a code from another region and try to apply it in a particular region, especially when the region has its own code. For any building or structure to be safe or deemed safe, it must comply with its local building code. It must comply with its local rules and standards and regulation that as a minimum standard where that structure or that building is localized. Types of building code. We have national code. National code is developed by government agency or standard organizations, depending on what they name it to be. And they are forced across the country by the federal government. Example of that is the SON that we have. SON is a standard organization of Nigeria, which gives a number for any product or any building material or any item that comes into Nigeria as the minimum required standard to meet this for the use in Nigeria. And Nigeria itself has a building code, which was adopted in 2006. And I know presently it's being revised and a lot of work has gone into it. I'm not sure that code has been signed into law yet, so it's the revised one, so that it becomes very useful and everybody will have to comply to it when it is signed into law. However, Nigeria has a building code. Modern building code. This is where the power of regulating construction and fire safety is vested in local or subnational authorities. Now, national building code refers to a nation or a country's code or standards that they have set aside. Now, when you have model building code, this refers um, like a state like Lagos, because of its peculiarity and the way things work out there, they can decide to actually get their own building code, which will be domesticated to Lagos State. And then buildings that will be built within Lagos State, we have to comply to that code. Those are modern building codes. And we also have international building code. This is where the power of regulating construction and fire safety is vested in international institutions in which local or national jurisdictions have been signed up to adopt common conventions. Example of this is in the aviation industry, because flights move from country to country, they need to have a common code internationally. That's why aviation monitoring and all that is certified by the international code. Yes, Nigeria has its own local code for the aviation industry, which they use to manage flights within the country. But when it has to be with international flights, it has to be international code. That's why you have a separate airport for international airports and then local airports. The international airports are the airports that have been able to comply to the minimum international standard as it relates to airport code, while the local airports are the ones that have complied to the local minimum standard as it refers to aircraft and airport management. I hope that is strictly taken. Building regulations parts. A, structure. The structural stability of a building. Once in the code is broken into different parts generally, and the different parts of the code take care of important parts of the industry, the build industry, or generally as it affects human living and the way the building interacts with human beings. So it's very important for us to note that all the building codes, actually there are a lot of codes. If you are by any means, the ones that Nigeria is very used to, and for those that are civil engineers, the ones that are really used to is the British code, which somehow Nigeria has adopted before Nigeria started working on this his own code. We use the British standards for a lot of the things that we do. That's BS standard, especially for construction industry. That's what we use. And the BS standard is a very large document. It is broken into different parts. The standard speculate things for concrete, for reinforcement, for cement, the cement grade that they are going to use, the reinforcement they will use, the formwork system, how it's been done, the electrical connection, the mechanical connections, the standards of pipes, standard of cables, standards of conduit pipes, standard of DB connectivity, the minimum required standard for a particular unit of concrete, or in terms of the weight of the concrete and what the concrete is supposed to achieve in terms of load of the concrete, what the concrete strength is in consonance with strength of materials, studying of different building materials, and understanding the character of the building materials, and then writing out a code to give guidance to any other person that will probably want to use that building material for a particular project, knowing the span of building materials in terms of reinforcement, in terms of concrete, in terms of steel works. How does it work? What's the span steel can carry? What's the span concrete can carry? Those are general things that are found inside the building code, inside the British standard, which Nigeria also have. Nigeria also has that interpreted. So they have this spread across for different structures. You have a structure. For a structure, the building code will look at the structural stability of the building and areas covered, including the design of foundation, walls, floors, and roof components. We talked about this when we were discussing our building fabric. The foundations, we talk about walls, we talk about floors, we talk about roof components. Now, for a structure, one of the things that the code addresses is the structural stability of the structure. Now, the building code takes care of ensuring that the building is standing. Now, that means every element of weathering that will weather that would affect that building, the building will still be standing for a given number of years. And normally, for any building that is properly built, it's expected that that building should be able to stand for a period of 50 years without requiring any major work on the building in terms of the structural elements. So the building is expected to stand or remain the way it is for another 50 years before any form of major renovation or rather restrengthening work or stability work will probably be done to that building. So buildings are actually expected to go more than that. Some does. I know there are buildings that are existing and are standing. They're over 100 years old. Those buildings are still standing and they're still okay because they use these codes and the minimum required standard was used in building those buildings. Also, it looks at the fire safety requirements for providing early warning of a developing fire. Normally, especially for commercial buildings, the minimum you must have smoke detectors, and then you must have fire alarm systems. So just when there is a fire, the system itself can detect this fire and ring the alarm for everybody to come out of the building and run to safety. And normally, once that is done, it is expected that apart from the alarm that it raises, there must be satisfactory escape route, like we mentioned when we're discussing space planning. That wherever somebody is seated in the office, it needs at least a minute to get to where the nearest exit point is. So it's very important for us to know that satisfactory escape routes in case of fire, then preventing fire spread both within and outside the building. We talked about when we were talking about the building fabric. We talked about firewalls. You know, there are some times that you should make provision for firewalls to ensure that when there is fire, it doesn't spread so fast to other buildings, and the spread in between the building is limited. Also, we look at providing good access and firefighting facilities for the fire service. Normally, once buildings are designed, it's expected for them to make adequate provision for fighting fire when there is fire, and access for the firefighting team to be able to access the facility in case of fire. Normally, once the fire hydrant or fire routes are being prepared in a building, there's what normally they prepare a dry run, a dry riser, which is supposed to be a point where the firefighting authorities can connect their water source into, and it can also supply the building in case the water fighting equipment that they have put, the firefighting equipment they put in the building actually fails, so that the one that comes from outside can actually also be used to fight fire, as it were. Also, site preparation and resistance to contaminants and moisture. The recommendation of making sure your property remains free from damp prevention, condensation, contamination that may be in the ground, and watertight. These are minimum things that normally we look at when it has to do with building. Sometimes it's more of specialized building that will probably take care of a lot of contamination. However, if the places where you are trying to build has been used to store toxic substance, normally that's why before you commence your building, you're supposed to do soil test. The soil test, apart from providing the relative density of the soil, which will give you the soil, the load bearing capacity of the soil, it also gives you the characteristics of the soil and let you understand whether that soil has a little bit of contaminant in them, so that you will know exactly what to do before the building is started up. Also, when we look at damp prevention, we talked about damp-proof membrane, damp-proof course coming all the way from the ground onto the house. Normally, once you are doing that, you are supposed to ensure that the foundations are quite water resistant and water tight so that you don't have a damp going into the building, because having damp in a building where people are living is quite dangerous and cancerous actually, because where you have too much damp in the building, it causes a lot of problem for the lungs of individuals that stay there. Toxic substance. Guide on the prevention of toxic substance permeating into the building when inserted, when inserting insulation into the cavity walls. Sometimes some of the elements or building materials that are used in some construction where you have cavity walls, that's why it is you must, as much as possible, ensure that it is properly sealed so that you don't have ingress of toxic substances coming into the building, which may end up affecting the people or that will be residing within the building, or rather the users of the building. Resistance to the passage of sound. Sometimes you require some level of sound attenuation in building, depending on the type of building, whether it's a theater building or churches or halls or malls. Requirement aimed to reduce sound transference between dwellings, flats, certain types of rooms, communal areas, and dwellings. Where you have houses like townhouses or terrace units, where they share common party walls, common walls that share that separate the two buildings, or where you also have things like block of flats. You use materials that will provide some level of insulation to ensure that sound does not travel from one part to the other. And for halls and for cinemas or for film halls, for theaters, the halls are normally soundproofed so that the sound that is generated within that space is normally kept within the space. Ventilation. This part provides for adequate level of ventilation to building, prevention of condensation from the roof voids. At least from you talked about ventilation. Ventilation helps to air the building so the building does not have concentration in between it, because normally when there is a temperature differential in a building, it has a way of affecting or causing a condensation where you have the hotter air in the building. Hygiene. Hygiene. Concerns with providing sanitary conveniences and adequate washing of facility includes requirements associated with unvetted hot water storage installations. Generally, hygiene, we know that you require that level of hygiene whether in your day-to-day life or where you work. You should have minimum standard for hygiene. For healthcare facilities, they require high level of hygiene for them to be able to take care of the people, especially for hospitals. The place must be hygienic so that people that come for treatment don't go back becoming more sick. Drainage and waste disposal. We must ensure that buildings and have adequate drainage to be able to drain storm water and then manage waste that the building is generating, whether organic waste or non-organic waste. It's very important that facilities have that. You imagine building a house without a septic tank or sewage system. So where will all the waste go to? It's very important for us to plan and work with that. That's what it's part of the reason, part of the things that the code makes provision for, that by minimum standard, you must make provision for waste disposal and also drainage to be able to drain the facility from stormwater, because there is no, it must rain. And then even if there's drought will come to an end and it will rain. Composition, appliance, and foil storage system covers safety requirements when installing either solid foil, gas, or oil heated appliances. Now, sometimes that, especially for filling stations, they have very strict regulations in the storage of the underground foil tanks or diesel tanks or whatever they store there. Very strict regulation such that The place needs to be well protected, have a lot of sandbags or sand areas so that in case of an explosion, the fire will be curtailed within the environment of the filling station or the position of the tank. Protection from falling, collapse, and impact, of course. Concerns with staircase designs, headrooms, handrails, balustrades, guarding of landing, balconies, and other raised areas. All the installations around these areas are supposed to be properly done in such a way that it doesn't constitute an hazard to users of the building. Conservation of fuel and power, provides minimum standard for energy efficiency in all parts of the building, also provides design critical for space heating and hot air storage. The hot air and space heating has to do with temperate regions where they have ice issues. So they will always make provision for good heating devices to be able to heat the flat so that people will be able to stay when it's cold, and for general providing the minimum standard to be able to make power efficiency in the building that you stay, so you don't exhaust or use out too much power. Access to and use of building. The design of the building to enable all people gain access, be able to use the facility of the building, and also includes requirements to help people with sight, hearing, and mobility impairment using the building. That is, every building must be in such a manner that all individuals will be able to use the building, such as those that are challenged, physically challenged, can be also be able to use the building. People like that have sight, hearing impairment, mobility, movement, they're paralyzed or something, using which should be able to access the building as it were. Glazing safety in relation to impact and opening and cleaning. Concerns with the provision of safety glass in installation in critical locations. Now, this regulates, especially for curtain walls, where you have curtain walls, facades, and thereabouts. Normally, the glasses that are used for such areas are normally safety glass. They are laminated and they are also toughened to ensure that in case there's any form of crack, the glass breaks into smaller pieces, which makes it safe in case the glass is crashing into somebody, instead of breaking into longer pieces, which will injure the individual, let us say, can even take lives of the individual, depending on how the glass shatters. Electrical safety. Appliances stored the electrical installation work in dwellings, common parts of dwellings and associated gardens. Electrical safety, you must ensure that all the electrical installations are properly protected so that you don't have electric shock going around. It's just standard to ensure that those things happen. Professional requirements. Now, the requirements to becoming an inspector or plant examiner. Now, normally from time to time, there are inspectors or there are people that visit buildings. For the way it's operated here in Nigeria, is such that it's very during construction. For Lagos, is domesticated with LASBAC. LASBAC is the agency that monitors building control in Lagos to ensure that buildings are built with a minimum required standard. Now, for LASBAC, they visit sites and they check for compliance, they check the reinforcement, they check for the concrete that you use to ensure that it meets the standard, the minimum required standard has been designed for the building, to ensure that you are not cutting corners with especially structural elements. They check your piping level, they check the building setbacks, they just check generally the ventilation and also the way the building is laid out to ensure that you have enough ventilation for the areas that have windows and thereabouts. Now, for these inspectors, there are minimum requirements for becoming an inspector and examiner. Must be at least 18 years and above. That's important. Must be of good moral character, because inspectors are prone to being given bribes, so they need to be of impeccable um, character. It's very important for that to happen. And I must have 5 years combined experience in the field of construction or a related field, inspection or plan review. Must also have a combination of postgraduate education, sorry, post-secondary education in the field of construction or related field. Must have a degree in the engineering, in building technology, as it were, maybe geography and regional planning, maybe estate management, architecture, infrastructural engineers, power engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, and so on and so forth. Must have that postgraduate experience. The requirements to become a building code administrator. That is the second one. Building code administrator must be at least 18 years old and must be of good character. Must have 10 years combined experience as an architect, engineer, or planner, or examiner, or plan examiner. With at least 5 years in such experience in supervisory position, a combination of post-secondary school education in the field of construction or related field is required. Purpose of building code: to provide suitable minimum standard requirements for one, safety of those that will be using the building, and then two, the health of those that will be using the building, and general welfare. General welfare is very important. You have safety, you have health, you have general welfare to ensure that the building does not collapse on people. It also, yeah, the purpose of the code also is also to ensure that those that are staying in the building in itself is able to house people without them being afraid to live in the building. Also provide certain minimum standards, provisions, and requirements for safety and stability of design. Now, the standard doesn't just take care of the building when it's being erected. It also takes care of the building as it's being designed, so that if there are any issues, it is resolved from the design stage. Corrections are made from the design stage. It makes it a lot easier for it to be managed than waiting for the building to be constructed and then coming to do the corrections. So normally, most buildings, the designs are well criticized, so that the whatever problems that that's why the regulators really need to be experienced, and being experienced is to ensure that they know exactly what to look out for once they are going through or reviewing the building design. The method of construction, they also look at the method of construction to ensure that yes, the design is good, but if the construction methodology is faulty, then of course there'll be issues. Then also look at the use of materials in the building or structures, the use of materials in the building or structures, to ensure that the right material is used in the right place and the right standard of material is what is used for the construction of the building. Scope of building codes. Standards for structural placement sizes. I've talked about that a little bit. The structural element of the building, the placement of the structural elements, and also the sizes. If you are using reinforcement, the reinforcement is very important. Where you are supposed to use a 20 mm, if you use a 14 mm, no matter how you try to use that or to carry the load, it will struggle to carry that load. That's why the regulators will always ensure that the right materials are used for the right places. Also, usage, wall assemblies, ingress roofs, foundations, and roof structures. These are all the areas that the inspectors will check and ensure. And the code covers these areas to ensure that every part of the building is actually covered. The rules regarding parking and traffic impact. Also, the code also covers parking, how you park. Like for an architect, the architect knows the minimum requirement for a car park, the size of a normal car, the size of the car park, and what kind of provisions you need to prove, and how movement should be within a parking lot, the traffic management plan. The architect should know that and know how to manage that. Fire code rules also, that is something that is covered under the code. Requirements for earthquake, flood, hurricane resistance. Where you have earthquakes, where you have hurricane, where you have so much flooding. This part of the world, you don't have so much of earthquake and hurricane. What you probably have is flooding or excess sun. Requirements for specific building uses, and energy provision and consumption, specification on components, reliable installation methodology, minimum and maximum room and exercises per location. Now, for churches that or large halls, there's a minimum requirement for the sizes of the doors or the number of doors that needs to be provided in case of emergency, so that people can run out quickly without having so much of stampede. Qualification of the individuals or corporation doing the work. For high structures, anti-collision markers for the benefit of aircraft. If you look at most high-rise buildings, especially in Ikoyi, Victoria Island, you will see a light that is always flashing there 247. It's always flashing at the top. It just beams and flash, beams and flash. That light is supposed to be for anti-aircraft collision. So when airplanes are flying over that level, they will know that there's a structure there when they see the light beaming, and they will also be careful to ensure that they don't collide with them. Building Code Administration, National Building Code of Nigeria, 2006. The National Building Code in Nigeria came into enforcement in 2006, like I said earlier on. The National Council of Housing and Urban Development deemed it necessary to initiate the process of evolving the National Building Code with a view to profile a lasting solution to accelerate trends in building construction industry. That's the reason why the building code was enacted into law. The aim of the building code to set minimum standard on building, pre-design and design, construction and post-construction stage, with a view to ensuring quality, safety, and proficiency in the building industry. Encourage professionals in the building industry to produce the most appropriate code suited to our environment. Also, for subsequent use and application. Scope of the National Building Code. Apply to and control all matters concerning design and specification, costing, construction, alteration. Addition to moving demolition and location, repair and use of any building or structure for existing or proposed building works within the Federal Republic of Nigeria. These are the scope of the building code, the National Building Code as it relates to Nigeria. Requirements and enforcement. Requirements and enforcement. Pre-design stage. The phase of analyzing the occurrence after some form of funding is available and before the design begins. During the pre-design phase, studies are done to analyze space requirement issues, the constraints and the opportunities of the proposed site, the cost variance, cost versus the budget. During the pre-design stage, some of all these things are supposed to be taken care of. You are supposed to study and analyze what is required for the space that you are planning to do, the constraints and the opportunities of the proposed site. You also look at cost versus budget to ensure that you have enough funds to fund the building. The pre-design phase may include site analysis, programming, construction cost analysis, and value engineering. During the preliminary stage, major emphasis is placed upon the civil, mechanical, and architectural design, because that's where you have most of the work that needs to be done. The design of all the mechanical processes is handled. The architectural concepts, if required, are developed and structural systems identified. All the required site investigations are made before the completion of this stage. It's just saying that all the site investigations, including the soil test, the acuity of the soil to ensure the water is coming and ensure everything works the way it's supposed to work. All the required site investigations are normally would be done before building commence. A sufficient number of drawings are then completed to communicate the design concept. Production of working drawings. That's what this is talking about. The working drawings actually form full interpretation of the intention of the designer of the structure to ensure that the structure is interpreted just like the designer has designed it. That's what happens with the working drawings. The number of drawings required is strictly dependent upon the size and the complexity of the project. The complexity of the project is what determines the number of drawings that is required. If you are building a stadium, for example, the drawings required for building a stadium is far different from when you are just building a 2-bedroom bungalow, a 1-bedroom bungalow. The one for 1-bedroom bungalow may just be one sheet that you can just start and look up and down. While that of a stadium may be tons and tons of drawings that normally will not be finished in a short time. And it's very important that all those drawings are made available as required. Final design. The final detailed architectural and structural and engineering drawing, which is the blueprint of all physical components of the project is provided. In some complex projects, the final design report is written in addition to the drawings that are submitted, which are the blueprint. Virtually all design problems must have been resolved because the end of the final stage, because you are at the end of the final stage. Sufficient details must be provided by the drawings and reported to allow reasonable estimates of the cost of construction, cost of operation, construction scheduling. All revisions to construction materials, machinery, or equipment specializations are made. Update schedule cost estimate, specification are contained in the final design report. Construction stage. In the construction stage, the construction stage commences after the finalization of design, after all the working drawings have been produced. In a traditional model, the appointment of a contractor to undertake the construction of the facility is done. It encompasses all the workers on site. Construction covers all the work requirements required to deliver the project as it has been designed. The contractor is responsible for undertaking all the works, provide all the materials, labor, plant, and equipment. Sometimes the client may decide to provide materials while the contractor provides the labor and plants and equipment. Controls the subsequent and coordination of the work. That's the contractor, responsible for coordinating with the work and other parties. Post-construction stage includes adjustment, optimization where necessary, modification of the building system to meet specific requirements. Where the building needs to be, where some adjustment to be made, it will be made in the building. The objective is to maintain building performance throughout the useful life of the facility. Defect liability period, I've talked about it. It's a set period of time after a construction project has been completed, during which the contractor has the right to return to site to remedy defects that are defective issues that have been put on site. A typical defect liability period lasts for 6 to 12 months. 6 to 12 months. Defect liability period will only arise if they are included in the contract, which I expect that it should be included in the contract. Purpose for defect liability period. For the contractor, it is likely to be more economical and efficient for it to be carried out. That's for the contractor to carry out remedial works itself than to pay the cost for another contractor to be hired to do it. The employer, from the employer side, the employer's perspective, he doesn't need to hire alternative contractor to carry out the work or to carry out the cost itself and reclaim the cost. Building design classification. Let's stop here and take a break. And when we return from the break, we'll go into the building design classification. The slides are not as we're going to building because that's just different. The different building classification. We'll go into it after the break. We'll take a 10 minutes break now, and then when we return, we'll continue. I hope that's fine with everybody.
Yes, please.
Okay then.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir.
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you. We'll just continue from building design classification. Building design classification. And the buildings are classified based on their uses anyway. Use A, assembly building, buildings with or without an auditorium in which persons assemble for amusement, entertainment, or recreation. Buildings with or without an auditorium in which persons assemble for amusement, entertainment, or recreation. Classification B. which is group B. Business building and professional uses. All buildings and structures used for the transaction of business, rendering professional services. C, educational buildings. All buildings and structures used for business or vocational training. D, factory and industrial uses. All buildings and structures in which occupants are engaged in performing work or labor in the fabricating, assembly, or processing of products and materials. E, high hazardous building. All buildings and structures used for the manufacturing and processing and generation or storage of corrosive, toxic, flammable, and explosive materials. G, mercantile uses. All buildings and structures used for display, sales purpose, incidental to such purposes and accessible to the public, such as markets, shopping mall, and all that. H, residential. All structures, building structure in which families, household live in, which they sleeping, accommodation, and for individuals or without dining facility, with or without dining facility. I, storage. All building or structure primarily used for storage of goods, warehouse, and merchandise. J, mixed use occupancy, when buildings is occupied for 2 or more uses. K, doubtful use classification, when a building or structure is for the purpose for a use that is not specified, specifically provided for in this code. L, utility or miscellaneous, when the building or structure of any ancestral character and miscellaneous structures. I come back from the beginning. Assembly building, this is talking about churches, auditoriums, stadiums, theater halls, or thereabout. B is talking about full commercial buildings, like headquarters of banks, business offices building, and all that commercial buildings. C, this is talking about schools, high institution, or thereabout. D talks about factories where you produce stuff. E talks about hazard chemicals, where you produce hazardous chemicals, and also inflammable materials, just like refineries or thereabout, fertilizer production plants and all that. It's separated from factories because it has a little bit of hazard to it, so special care is normally taken for that. G for merchandise. This is for markets, shopping mall, or thereabout, shop arcades and all that. H, residential building, we know that. I, storage, warehousing. J, mixed use structure, where probably you have bank, you have just multi-level buildings where you have residential and offices, residential and shopping arcade, residential and let's say school or church or thereabouts. That's what you have in mixed use. K, when the use is not specified, when the building is just constructed, and after a while, there's no specific use. They can use it for anything. Maybe just an open hall, a space that can be used for anything. Miscellaneous, utility of miscellaneous building. These are normally buildings that are found in very large factories where you just build a shelter that they can be used for anything, probably for assembly. They can use it sometimes as makeshift area for doing some work, or maybe construction yard where they just store their materials and use it as the need arises. energy efficiency in building. According to EIA statistics for energy balance, 2004, 2005, 2007 edition, the total energy use globally accounts for 7,209 metons. That's megatons oil equivalent. The residential commercial section accounts respectively for 1,951 and 633. That means residential takes more, while the commercial sector takes less, which is almost 40% of the final energy used in the world. That is, the energy that is consumed in the world is majorly from residential buildings and from commercial buildings, while the other ones are spread across the other ones. So if you want to reduce energy efficiency, the targeted areas are commercial sector and the residential. Commercial sector and residential. Even within commercial and residential, we discover that residential takes more because that's where people stay more. That's where they use more of the gadgets. Works happen in the morning to in the evening and they close, while residential, you have things that some things will be on throughout the life of the building. Your refrigerator will probably always be on. Some areas, your washing machine, your pumping machine will always be on, and so on and so forth. Improvement of building efficiency at planning stage is relatively simple. Normally, this means that at the time of planning or designing the structure, it's expected that, especially for the electrical appliances, that the electrical engineer adds a little bit of value engineering into what he's doing to ensure that the building becomes more energy efficient and consumes less energy as to the old buildings that used to consume more power. So with each new building, it's expected that, especially now that the cost of energy is becoming too high, most people go buy energy saver bulbs just to be able to reduce the energy consumption in their homes or wherever they find it. So improvement after their initial construction is much more difficult. Now, this is saying that it's better to do it at the design stage than to do it when construction has been done. Whatever improvement needs to be done, you will do it before the building is constructed. It's cheaper and better and faster. Decision made during a building project phase determines consumption over much of a building lifestyle. Some measures to improve efficiency are possible only during construction or by major refurbishment. Improvement will be very costly, will be very cost effective when implemented at the project phase. Can be expensive at a later stage. Implementation of improved technology is better when the project is being constructed than when the project has finished, and that is when you now return back to now start implementing it. Is more expensive because we'll be doing a lot of demolition here and there, and it's not always good for the building when that is being done. The increased interest will spur the demand for refurbishment. This refurbishment provides a compelling opportunity to improve a building efficiency. Requirements for energy efficiency by refurbishment are therefore an important issue which should be included in building code. Normally, from time to time, refurbishment happen in structures. You do renovations, and once that renovation is done, it's an opportunity for you to try and improve the energy efficiency of the building, where you have the opportunity of changing like the DB, the power system, the lighting system, and all that. And for building maintenance standard, what is building maintenance standard? Minimum standard for design, construction, and alteration to virtually every building. Developed by the government professional bodies, etc., contains a list of requirements that are designed to ensure minimum standard of health and safety welfare. Like in Lagos State now, to undergo innovation in your building or to maintain your building, you must do a non-destructive test. It is very important. If not, they will not grant you permit. If you start doing any work without that, they will come and seal up the site to say that you're not working safe. So it's very important for you to note that, so that if you are doing any innovation in your house, you go and seek permit from Lagos State. They will come do a non-destructive test to ensure that the building is still in good position, so that you don't come and demolish it afterwards. The purpose for building standard is to maintenance standard is to achieve a minimum standard for the building work. It applies to most types of building, including domestic, commercial, and industrial buildings, especially related to technical aspects of the construction. Set standards for the design and construction of the building. Like some building, once you are trying to do like remodeling in buildings, sometimes you require some specialized way to work, especially when you're trying to break off some walls and all that. There are steps that you need to take to do that, so that you don't eventually cause the building to collapse. And sometimes you need to reinforce the structural element of the building. You need to improve probably the beams, the columns or thereabout where it is needed. Where you have issues with foundation, is an opportunity for you to also work on it. So it is very important that you note that when you are doing any form of refurbishment, you must take that into consideration. Objective of building standard to remake with amendments the regulations which control the design, construction, and use of building and place of public entertainment, to prescribe standard for the construction and demolition of buildings. Also to prescribe standard of safety for places of public entertainment, also to regulate matters relating to the use and maintenance of the building and place of public entertainment, to prescribe requirements for the design and siting of single dwelling and associated building, to prescribe standards and matters related to maintenance of fire safety and safety measures, also to prescribe requirements for swimming pool, spa safety, etc. So I don't have people drowning in swimming pool. Is building regulation approval the same as obtaining planning permit? The answer is generally no. They are not the same thing. Building regulation approval does not mean the same thing as obtaining planning permits for your work. Planning permits, they will look at the designs, the drawings, and see that it meets the required standard, and then you will get approval for it. Then when you are constructing, that's when you have the building regulation approval. It is after the construction has been done. Being granted planning permit is not the same as taking action to ensure that the work complies with the building regulations. Generally, you will have to adhere to the building regulations for the building works or internal alteration of properties, and such you may not require planning approval. Many types of building work, you may need to apply for building regulation and building planning permits separately. So this is just to generally educate us. When it has to do with building, planning approval is totally different from building regulation. In Lagos, the Lagos State Planning and Physical Planning will give you planning approval. While for building regulation approval, you will get that from LASBAC, and that you only get after the building has been constructed in Lagos. They will now give you a certificate of fitness that this building has passed the required check and it is certified and okay for people to live and inhabit the building. I think this should be the last slide. Yes, that's it. So I'll take our questions now, and then whatever questions you may have, I'll take that and try to answer as it goes. Thank you very much. Please, if you have your questions, you can raise your hand and indicate by raising your hand. I will take your questions, please. I'll probably expect us to ask a lot of questions now because I know as facility managers, we'll be doing a lot of renovation work in our properties. In case you have issues with the planning authorities, you can ask questions and then I'll be able to explain to you how those things go around. Okay, I can see Godwin. Godwin, your hand. Let me take your question.
Okay. Good evening, Ogausi, and also
Good evening,
everyone
sir.
in class. Yes, sir. Please, I wanted to confirm with regards to compliance and authority regulations.
Yes, sir.
Please, is there a standard list of documents that during during design stage and also after completion that would guide us, that is facility managers, if there should be any? I know that these regulatory bodies are always enforcing and trying to make sure that compliance is key. So for us to always be a step ahead of them, is there a standard or a basic list of documents which could facilitate us in making us equipped during compliances and also regulatory body?
Okay, just straight up for construction of buildings, there's especially for planning approval, there are list of drawings or list of documents you must make provision for. And first of all, you must have the complete architectural drawing, which they will inspect. And in the architectural drawing, there are some things to look out for. You look at setbacks, you look at the size of the toilets, and they also look at the ventilation of every room that is provided for and the sizes of that room. The room sizes are standard. The minimum required for a living room, for a bedroom, which is the most important thing they look at, is actually 10 by 12. 10 feet by 12 feet, which is about 3 meters by 3.6 meters. That's the volume they look at. Then for toilet, they look at, I think, a total of 1 meter by 1.8. That's what they also look out for. Then the setback for residential, around for a 2-story residential, around the bordering fence is normally 3 meters. And for the built areas, it's supposed to be nothing more than, it should be under 45% of the built area that you must build on your site, so that you have adequate space for ventilation and airspace around the building. Those are the few ones off my head. The other ones are things that as I do my design, actually, it comes. Then for the submission of documentation, after the architectural drawings have been done, they are expected to provide 5 sets of architectural drawings, also 5 sets of structural drawings with letter of supervision for buildings that are from ground floor to 2nd floor. By the time it's going from 3rd floor and above, you require the mechanical drawing that shows that the building will be probably well functional, because you'll probably be looking for getting a lift thereabout in all those items. So each of those drawings, you actually need to provide them 5 sets of data, and all the drawings must be signed, sealed, and stamped by a registered. I hope I've answered the question.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Jude, I can hear you now, please. Jude, I can see your hand. You can unmute your mic.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I've unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you faintly, but go ahead.
Okay. to which extent will a renovation work be considered to be to the extent that one will have to provide or seek permit for such renovation, whether in a residential or commercial building?
Okay, if I get you where you're saying, in what extent do you need to provide documentation? Now in Lagos State, any renovation you are doing, you're supposed to go and get a permit. You're supposed to get a renovation permit, and that permit will state exactly what you want to do in the building. Once you apply for it anyway, you write a letter to the LASBAC, the planning authorities. They will now ask for the drawings of the building you are talking about and check out exactly what you want to do. If you're not touching the structure of the building, you don't have any problem. They will just give you a letter that covers all the items of work you want. Probably you want to just change the windows to modern windows. You want to change the floor tiles or the wall tiles in the building. You want to paint the building. As much as you are not remodeling, you are not increasing the floor, you're not doing any demolition work. You are fine. That one is straightforward. I think if you just pay a fee and then they'll give you the permit. But when you have to do some structural alteration on the existing building, you are breaking some walls, increasing size of rooms, adding some new walls, you are doing one thing or the other on the existing structure, you would need to do a non-destructive test. They will ask for the fresh drawing of what you are doing, the existing drawing of what is there. They will also ask for a structural drawing, and all the drawings that are required will need to be signed, stamped, and sealed by a qualified registered professional. I hope I've answered your question, sir.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Any other question? Please, let's ask our questions. Okay, Clement, I can see your hand. Please, your question, please.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for today's lecture. Please, I want to know.
Please go ahead.
In which one can follow if you have a maybe structure to develop in Lagos State. What are the process?
Okay, I'd actually run through this before, but I'll do it again. If you have a structure to develop in Lagos, if you have a piece of land, first of all, you need to get a qualified architect to do the design for you. Once your design is done, you will then be required to take that architectural design to the planning authorities. They are normally situated around this. Each local government have a planning state planning office. Each local government, they have their district offices in each local government. Immediately you go to the local government, you see them there, you submit the drawings, they will look at it and vet it. And while they are doing that, when they are looking at it and vetting it, once they have vetted it, they will actually now give it back to you with their comments and their corrections that you need to do if they are any. If there are no comments, if there are no corrections to be done, they will ask you to go and produce 5 copies of that drawing, stamped, signed, and sealed by a registered architect. They will also ask you to provide 5 copies of the architectural drawings, stamped, sealed, and signed by a registered structural engineer. And also the structural engineer will have to provide a letter of supervision to show that, oh, I'm the one that designed this building and I will supervise it when it is being constructed. When you have submitted those 2 drawings, they will give you an assessment form. In fact, they will fill out the assessment form, they'll give it to you. They have a calculation they'll give to you of a regulation of what you are going to pay to the Lagos State, both planning approval and the LASBAC, the state, the building monitoring agency. Once those payments are made and you have been cleared and you have your approval, your building approval, they will give you a letter to tell you that this design you have given has been approved for you to commence construction. Once that letter is given to you, you are expected to now write officially to LASBAC, the Lagos State Building Control Agency, to intimate them of your intention to commence construction. Once they get this letter, they would reply you requesting for the drawings that you got, your approval drawings. They will request for it. After they have requested for it, they will go through it and check it. Once they have checked that, they will now reply you with a letter saying you can go ahead and commence construction, but they must be involved at any major milestone of the project. Once you are doing your foundation work, you will have to invite them. Once you are doing your columns, you have to invite them. Once you are doing your slab and your beams, you have to invite them. Any of the structural elements you are doing in the building, you have to invite them to come. They will come, certify it okay before you proceed to cast. Each level, they'll give you what they call stage approval. For each level, you'll be given approval for that. And that's how you go through till the building is completed. And once the building is completed, you will now fill out, there's this form C they'll give you where you fill out, and they will always come for inspections anyway. And once that is done, you are completed your building, you fill out the form C, submit to them, they will now sign and stamp it and give you a certificate of fitness that the building is okay for occupancy. That's just a brief run of the process that it takes. I hope I've answered your question, Mr. Clement. Okay, I can see Jude again. Please go ahead and speak, Jude.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Osi.
Yes,
the
sir.
next question I want to ask is concerning a situation where there is an urgency to commence building. I've seen some places where the authority, the planning authority, will give permit to begin construction even before the approval comes out. Is this still tenable with in Lagos State Physical Planning Authority?
Well, they really do not give that. They give concession when they know that, okay, you explain to them that you need to commence and your process has started. It is when you have passed through the initial process of payment and registering that plan with the Lagos State Planning authorities. If you have not registered that, you cannot commence. You have a registration number before your permit number comes out. However, I do not advise that you go through that because it's like almost like an illegal way of doing it. And the tax force will always come and disturb you, and you keep paying and giving them PRO. So it's always better to go through the process, get your plans before you commence construction. It's always neater and better.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
All right then. Any other question? Okay, if there are no questions, again, we'll call it a day tonight. And I want to thank you again for your time. And I hope you have learned one or two things through this discourse of today. And where you, like I always say, if you have any questions that you remember after the class has ended, don't be shy, just send it to the secretariat and they'll forward it to us and then we'll attend to it. Thank you very much for your time and God bless you. Good night.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.